Are you helping or are you hurting? That's a very good question, isn't it? When I start my workshop for service providers, my first question is usually, why are you doing the work that you are doing? And do you feel like you're helping or do you feel like you're hurting the very individuals you want to support? So the first question is, why are you doing what you are doing? And that's something that we're going to discuss in another episode. But in this episode, we are going to focus more on the question, are you helping the individuals or are you hurting them? It's actually a very complex thing, and there is a lot of layers to it, so let's get to it. First of all, the first thing I always remind my audience in workshops is that you are a helper. This is how you are wired. And you know that, which is why you decided to choose the position that you are in today. Whether you're a service provider, social worker, housing worker, 911 caller, police, ambulance. I mean, there's so many professions for you in this sector. But the point is that you went into this job at the very beginning, if you can remember, is because you wanted to help. You wanted to give back. Because probably at some point you were in a place in your life when something terrible happened to you, somebody helped you, and that really, really inspired you. Or you saw your mom, your parents, your family doing it. In any case, for some reason, you chose this profession because that's who you are, which means that I can guarantee you that you don't wake up every morning thinking, whose life are you going to screw up today? I know that, you know that. So that's actually a very important part of this conversation, to know who you are, to know that you're wired this way, to know that you have the best intentions, to know that you never actually want to hurt anyone intentionally. And I would love for you to remember that. And from now on, every morning when you wake up, remind yourself of that, because honestly, in many ways, it's an absolute gift and a privilege to be there for people in the worst, darkest moment of their lives. And other times, it does not feel like a privilege at all. There was times when I just did not want to get out of bed and go to work, but I did. And there's nothing else I would rather do with my life than trying to help, because that's who I am and that's who you are. And that's a very, very important part of the conversation you should have with yourself every single day. But let's get back to the part where, are we helping or are we hurting? So now that we reminded ourselves who we are, how we are wired, and that we never actually want to hurt anybody intentionally, now let's talk about, are we helping or hurting? Let me tell you a little bit of a story. 15 years ago, I had an organization called Walk With Me Canada Victim Services. And one of the things that we did is we did mobile crisis counseling. We attended to calls. Mainly, these calls would come from the police or parents, where they would find me online. And they would call us when they had a victim of human trafficking in a very tricky situation, or in a mindset where it was really, really hard to navigate. And obviously law enforcement or the parents or whoever called us wanted the best for this victim. But the best for this victim looked very different for the victim than the service providers. And that's a whole other conversation. But anyways, we would get called and then we would get to the scene and we would navigate from there. I just started this organization and I just actually started this form of assisting victims, and this was very specified for victims of human trafficking, and there was actually no textbooks at the time how to do this. And I'm not saying this as an excuse. I'm just saying that at the time, there was not a lot of education on how to do what we were doing. We were kind of had to figure it out as we were going. But what we did have, I have taken counseling courses for 2 years before. I was working for victim services before, and my staff actually came with social worker experience. Our executive director also had a master's in social work. So we did have all the qualifications on paper that you think you would need unable to succeed with our mission. But doing things in real life is very, very, very different. So here I am early days getting a call from a family member who was extremely worried about the 19 years old daughter. Apparently, she has not been home for 2 years. She's from a small town, moved to a big city, worked as a bartender for a while, and eventually just stopped coming home, stopped connecting with her family, her parents, her siblings, and her parents starting to see huge changes on her social media profile. They actually haven't heard from their daughter at this time for 2 months. And so they were extremely worried about her. And they wanted me to either find her or get the police involved and see if they would do something about it. So at this point, it was really more of a missing case than human trafficking, but they kind of learned a little bit about human trafficking at the time from a friend of a friend, so they thought their daughter might have been trafficked. In any case, I went to visit the family. We had a long conversation. I took a look at everything that the family had on their daughter. And indeed, I started to see changes in her lifestyle that may have indicated that she may actually have been trafficked. So all I could tell at the time to the family that, I'm not a police officer, but we probably should report this, and the authorities would be able to keep an eye on her. So that's the only thing I could do for the family at the time. And I remember driving away from them and thinking like, there's nothing more I can do. But I felt terrible because they had all these hopes in me to be able to get all the answers for them that they haven't been able to get for, a long time. And in a sense, I give them some answers, but I basically just confirmed their worst nightmare, which was that their daughter was actually trafficked. So deep inside, I felt, like the angel of death, more of a helper. But in any case, I drove home and I couldn't stop thinking about this girl. So, of course, I called the police and I gave them all the information and just could not stop thinking about her. But anyways, next case after next case after next case, I was still thinking about this girl. I was staying in touch with the parents. And about 2 months later, I got a call from their family friend who was at this family meeting as well. And he said that she's with him right now and he wants me to go and visit her. I ended up going to meet the young lady. And all I remembered is sitting there with her and just fully knowing where she's at, meaning she was not ready to give up anything. She was not ready to come forward. She was absolutely terrified, but she didn't say anything to me. She was very polite. And I understand that my job was to go in there, guns and blazing, and just with my agenda to say, I'm going to take you with me. I'm going to take you home. And now you're going to be safe. And the truth is, even though that's what a normal human being would want to do for somebody who's in a very terrible situation, I just couldn't do that, even though I wanted to. And I made that very clear to her that I'm here to help. I would like you to come with me. I can take you to a safe place. You don't have to go back to your parents right away and to your siblings. But she would just not want to come with me. She did disclose that she's terrified. She did disclose that she's been beaten. She did basically tell me everything that I already felt, that she's being trafficked. And by then I understood that she was actually trafficked by the worst type of trafficker, in my personal opinion, is called the gorilla pimp, which uses a lot of abuse, physical abuse, and emotional, of course, but physical. So I know that she was not safe when she went back into that environment. But the thing is, guys, that she wasn't ready. And that was like a horrible, horrible situation for her mainly. But as a helper, I could not help but thinking like, regardless of what she thinks, I'm just going to drag her out of there. But you can't do that. And so I had to drive away. And I did. But before I drove away, I sat down and I had a conversation with her heart to heart. And I looked her in the eye. And I wanted to make sure that she will remember what I say, which was, I know you're not going to come with me now. I know you're going to have to go back and do what you have to do. I don't know why, only you know that. But I want you to know that when you are in your darkest, darkest place, And if you are able to make a call, here's the number. Please call. We will be there and we will get you. And even though I wanted to do so much more for her, I knew at the time that there's nothing else I can do for her right now. She wasn't ready. And it's not my journey, it's hers. And my job is to, God knows what it is, but at the time I knew that I just could not take her with me. First of all, that would be kidnapping. And last time I checked, that was totally against the Canadian law or any other law for that matter. But nonetheless, I thanked her very much for her time. I wanted her to know that I really appreciate her trust. And I wanted her to feel that I feel that we are on the same level here. Just because she's in a tough spot, I was in the same situation 10 years before. Doesn't mean I'm cooler or better than her. So I just wanted her to feel that there's no judgment here. And even though I know that when she goes back, she's going to go back to a terrible situation. She's going to be beaten. And I really, really hope she's actually going to survive. My worst fear was if she goes back, he might actually kill her. And I don't know how I would have lived with that for the rest of my life. But I knew, regardless, that in that moment, I had to leave. And I left her, and she went back. And I do remember driving away, and I remember being so incredibly upset. And I remember just having this huge struggle. What's the point of doing what I'm doing if I can't actually help? But you see, many years later, I realized that helping the way I want to help and the help that they need might look very differently. And I learned that lesson for years and years. And it took me a long time to learn that lesson. But it really basically, that lesson was the most humbling lesson I could learn, which is, it's not my life. It's not my journey. Who am I to tell someone how to or what to? The only thing I can do is to walk with them, to support them, and show them the way, and plant those seeds, and just hope to God that they're going to make the right decision at the time when they are ready. And again, the right decision. What is the right decision? Again, that's not up to us. So I think the hardest part about being a helper is to know if you're helping or hurting. In this situation, when I walked away, I totally thought I was going to hurt her by letting her go. But then after this case, I had many other cases where I didn't actually listen to that instinct and I took them out of the situation. And it didn't actually help the situation at all. So helping or hurting? Well, back to this young lady, my instincts were right. Even though it was hurting me at the time, I was actually helping her. She did go back. She did get into a terrible situation, but she did call. And when she called, we went to pick her up. And she was ready. She was completely ready to change her life. To this day, she's doing well. She went to school. She went to college. She became, I think she took security and then nursing. I mean, again, are we helping? Are we hurting? So the most important thing that we need to talk about, especially in this episode, is other than who you are, we already established that you're a helper. When we go back to the why, your why did you become a helper? Who inspired you? What situation, life situation? So say, your family was homeless and a social worker came and they helped you guys out of the situation. And because of that social worker, you guys were able to move into an apartment and start a better life. And so it worked. You've seen that social worker being able to make changes in somebody else's life, and that was really inspiring for you. So you wanted to become a social worker and work in the housing sector and achieve the same dreams and hopes that you once had with your family. Now, what happens when you work with 200 clients and out of 200 clients, maybe one or two will be able to achieve the same things that you and your family achieve, and for various reasons. Not enough resources, not enough support, not enough housing, not enough money. And or some of the clients' trauma is just so beyond that they just literally are not ready to go back to society. It's not what they want. It's not helpful for them. How does that make you feel? So as a helper in this situation, do you feel like you're not doing enough? Do you feel like that you're not making a difference? Most of the time when I talk about this in my workshops and I ask this question, 90% of the people put their hands up. And they say no, they feel like they're not making a difference and they feel like that they don't see the world changing for the better. And then I ask, why are you still here? And then one after another, they say, because I don't know what else to do with my life, because this is all I ever wanted to do. And I'm not going to just quit because I don't see changes. Well, here's the thing, guys. You might never see the changes you made in somebody's life. You may never actually going to see the difference you make. And for two reasons. One is because simply they move away, this and that, you change jobs. But the other is because the change looks very differently for you and for them. So, for example, a person who's been homeless their entire life, and they've been moving around shelter to shelter. But maybe just one day, maybe they're able to settle in one place for a little bit longer because of what you said or what you did, or feel like that they were matter, or feel like that they were seen or heard because of the conversations you had with them. Or what about the person who may never actually going to make those changes that you think they should make, but they just simply feel better about themselves and they start helping somebody else. They feel like that they might not be able to help themselves, but they're going to start inspiring and supporting another shelter mate who just came into the shelter by simply telling him, you know what, I really like that lady, I trust that lady, you should go and talk to her. You literally have no idea in all the million ways that you are actually making a difference. And the hardest part is that you don't see it. And also, you don't see it because you have your own vision, your own idea, your own picture of what help actually is like. So are you helping or hurting? Well, if you just remind yourself every single day before you go to work that your intentions are not to go and screw somebody else's life up, I would say, by all definitions, that means that you are helping. You're helping by showing up. You're helping by giving your best. You're helping by caring. You're helping by giving a piece of you every single time you're working with someone, whether you're doctor, EMS, nurse, police, and the list goes on. You're helping. I think it's just the idea of what do you think help is? And I think that's the part that we need to really rethink as helpers. I think we need to be okay with the fact that we are helpers. We need to get very clear on who we are and that that's how we are wired and that there's nothing we can do about it. And remind ourselves every single day when we go to work, I'm here to help. For whatever reason, I'm here to help. I'm doing my best. I went to school, I learned this, I did every step so that I can be here and have this quote-unquote qualification to be in front of another human being and guide them to a better life or to safety or health. So whenever you question yourself, am I helping or am I hurting? I think go back to the basics and just remind yourself who you are. Remind yourself that you have no intentions of hurting somebody, but also remind yourself that you are not God or this higher power. You don't know everything, and there are things that are completely out of our control. And that's another piece that we have to find a way to make peace with. That's another piece that we really, really have to learn to kind of integrate into our everyday life and everyday thinking. And that's the part that I call let go. You did the best you could. You met with this individual. You offered everything you could. And you need to trust that that individual that you just worked with, talked to, supported, guided, will take whatever resonates from what you said or done for them and leave the rest that is not time for them to understand or act on. And that's where fate or destiny or whatever comes in place. And so when I was a survivor and when I was in a traumatic situation and I was guided at the time by a police officer, an immigration officer, and a social worker, they gave me a whole bunch of stuff, a lot of guidance, a lot of support, a lot of resources. And they had all the great intentions. But at the time, I was only ready for so much. But I took what I could at the time. And then a year later, I took the next steps. And a year later, I took the next steps. And, 28 years later, I'm still remembering some of the things they told me 20 years ago. And it's just sinking in now. So please know that you're absolutely helping. And just please remember that the hardest part of knowing are you helping or hurting is that you don't see the difference that you are making. And it's also really hard to find that fine line and how far you walk with this individual, right? We always say, meet me halfway. And I love that saying. And that was a very popular saying with us during Walk With Me times, where we said to all of our social workers, as a reminder, we need to meet the client halfway. We can't give them more than they can handle at the time. We cannot put more responsibilities or tasks on them than they can handle at this very moment. So it is our job to know, to assess where that individual is. What are the immediate needs? And how can we meet them where they are at, emotionally, psychologically, financially, physically? This is another thing that's very important. So we come from normal. I mean, anybody who's in a helper position, most likely you probably have your own housing, your own shelter, your own car. You probably have some kind of a financial security. I mean, obviously, if you are there to be able to help somebody, that means you are not yourself in crisis. That's another thing we're going to talk about actually in another episode. That you can help someone if you're in crisis yourself. But for now, let's just focus on the thought process of you are as stable as you can be as a helper. So you have your form of normal. Your normal is whatever that is, living in a house, apartment, condo, but you go make your coffee, you get dressed, you get in your car, you go to work, and you meet this individual, whoever they are, whichever trauma situation they are in, or the darkest moment of their life they're in. You have your normal. That person's normal looks very differently right now, or have looked very differently for the last year or two or decade, right? So what your normal is not their normal. So that's why we always say you need to assess this individual and see where they're at and what their immediate need is, and see how you can support that. That's where I think a lot of times, especially when it comes to frontline work and case management and casework, that's where things kind of fall apart a little bit, because the helper has a very different idea on what the individual needs. And so they're clearly not in sync with what this individual actually needs versus what the helper wants to offer. So that brings me to almost the last point of this conversation is, in this industry or sector, you often have these conversations, especially at conferences, where people say, can you tell us a success story? Our best practices, but mainly success story. Wow. I absolutely hate that word success when it comes to frontline work. What the hell is success means? So say you did everything you could for this client and they died. Does that mean you failed and you were not successful? Or let's say the client did everything they could, but they just had so much trauma they couldn't step forward and they died of an overdose. Does that mean that client wasn't successful? It's not a success story. We're going to heavily unpack that topic in another episode. But when it comes to you as a helper, what is success looks like to you? Well, I think we need to erase that word from our vocabulary. I think we can replace it with, how do you feel about yourself and about the work that you are doing? Do you think you were able to influence one person out of the hundreds or thousands of lives you have touched? Do you think you were there for somebody in their darkest time? Do you think you were able to inspire someone? Do you think you were able to make someone feel like they were not alone? Were you able to do something for someone behind their back that they never even knew that you were the one who was doing it, but you saw that they were able to move into this new place or got a car or got approved for some kind of a application that they've been trying for 25 years? If the answer is yes for any of those questions, honestly, I definitely think you are a helper. And I think the days when you're questioning yourself if you're helping or hurting, you just need to remind yourself of all the things and all the positive outcomes that you were able to witness yourself. And please note that the funny thing about helpers is, when you sit down and think about all the work that you've done, all the people you've met, all the people that you worked with, out of all the stories, you're going to laugh when I say this or giggle, but you only remember most of the time the ones that gone wrong. Why is that? Why not think about the ones that actually went, quote unquote, right? And how do you know that the ones that gone wrong, that they actually went really wrong? You don't know that. They may have moved away. You don't know where they're going to be 10 years from now on. All I'm saying is that when you sit down and when you start burning out, when you feel like you're not sure if you're helping or hurting, remember who you are, why you started this, and that your intentions are right. And remind yourself of the stories that you actually know that they turned out okay. In my case, I had a police officer who was there with me through the darkest times of my life. But he couldn't help me with everything. I was homeless. I didn't have money. I didn't have food to eat. I mean, I didn't speak English. I couldn't get a job. He couldn't fix 20 years of trauma in 2 months or 5 minutes, which is another thing we're going to talk about in another episode. He did the best he could with what he had. It wasn't part of his job description to answer the phone for me 24/7, but he did. And at the time, he felt like that was my biggest need. And he was right. I was alone. I was scared. And he was the only person that I could trust and talk to. And so he was that person for me. I'm sure at some point he was thinking, oh gosh, I can't help her. She's homeless again. I can't give her money. I actually don't even know how he really felt. But what I do know is that he was just keep showing up for me. And to this day, I talk about it. And to this day, I credit a lot of my healing journey to him. He was just a police officer. He wasn't a chief. He wasn't a millionaire. He wasn't all that, but he was everything that I needed at the time, as selfish as it sounds right now. Because on the other hand, now I know that his wife woke up every single time when I call at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and I feel really bad. And since then, I got her flowers and everything. But anyways, just be yourself. Do what you can within the resources you have. And just know that you're enough. And so on that note, I do think you're a helper. I really hope that by the end of this episode, you feel like you're a helper too. And as always, I just want to thank you all so very much for showing up for a very broken society, which actually sounds very gloomy. It's not really that gloomy. Yes, it's a broken society right now, but I do think that we are making changes every single day. And we just have to keep the hope up. And otherwise, what really is the point? But again, as usual, just want to thank you all so very much for the work that you are doing, for the personal sacrifices that you are making. and for showing up for our society, for showing up for people that are in a very difficult, darkest time of their life. Because believe me, it matters. Believe me, you are making a difference, even if you don't see it. So hopefully this was helpful. Have a safe drive home or to work or wherever you are going. Thank you for listening, and hopefully we can reconnect at the next episode.